So proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting
We are going to hear part two from one of our members, Dan Sanko, about the F4U Vought Corsair and the squadron that his dad served in during the Korean War, was killed in combat. So without further ado, you all know Dan, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. We're going to talk about 653 in the Korean War. And we look at this, one of the stars of the show, cast of characters, whatever. This is the FU-4-4. A lot of them came at the end of World War II. It was faster. It was had a bigger cockpit. It was easier to fly in some respects. But the key to this particular aircraft is it served on both the Boxer in Korea, and then for VF-884, which was a reserve unit out of the Bitterbirds, a reserve unit out of Kansas, Olathe, Kansas. And I think they called themselves the Bitterbirds because they were one of 4 units called up for Korea that had 24 hours to get ready to leave for San Diego. And then those aircraft were actually, when VF-653 left San Diego for Japan, they had brand new F4U-4Bs, 20 millimeter cannons, really nice airplanes. 3 days before they got to Japan, they got the word, you're going to transfer those to the Marines. And we have some other refurbished aircraft we're going to give you. So basically, the Boxer's aircraft ended up on the Valley Forge. And it took me years to figure out. I knew these things, but I never knew how they happened. You'd find things such as looking at the after-action reports. Oh, how the heck did they get the airplanes changed? Anyway, but this particular aircraft eventually ended up in Nicaragua. A fellow by the name of Joe Tobel, who was flew aircraft in the Marine Corps. Him and his son Jim wanted to get an airplane and rebuild it. They had Jim had an engineering company or a manufacturing company here in PA called Tobel Accumulator, and so obviously he had some money. The plane originally was purchased by a fellow from a TWA pilot from St. Louis, who got it from the Nicaraguans. It was a spare parts plane and totally in pieces when he picked it up. He thought when he got to St. Louis, people would love to help him rebuild it, and then he could fly it. Well, what he found was a lot of people wanted to fly it, not so many people wanted to rebuild it. Okay, so then he sold that to an American Airlines pilot in Hollywood, Florida, who had, as Joe, in a little video I'd seen, said, had delusions of grandeur. But then a divorce came along, and, well, that kind of fell apart. So meanwhile, Tobels are looking for a plane. They go to Florida to see this aircraft. The beauty of it, it was in pieces. So they actually could see the inside of the airplane parts. And actually, the frames and all the key parts are in pretty good condition. So they hauled that back to Pittsburgh, rebuilt it, and took them 10 years, rebuilt it in Sewickley Airport, and flew that airplane, I think initially, what was that, 81, I think. They required it in 81, it was about 91 when they flew it. I saw it at Latrobe June or July the next year and met Joe. And then they moved he ended up moving to his company down to South Carolina, and they were doing an air show in Columbia, and there was every year, and there was a VA hospital there. So he started doing flybys at the VA hospital, which was popular. It turned into kind of a big deal. But in 2002, they're doing the slow flyby. The engine quit. I think there might have been a fire. Couldn't do anything with it other than put it in a stand of trees to keep it from hitting anything important. And he was killed in that crash. Jim took the parts, brought them back to South Carolina. Took him 6 years to say, you know, I think I really want to rebuild this airplane. And he started to do it, and he was making pretty slow progress. And a friend of his from up in Colorado, this Bill Clares, he had a restoration business up there. He called Jim and said, hey, I know you're doing great. By the time you're done building it, you won't be able to fly. It'll be too old. Send it here with all the parts you got. In 2 years, I'll have it flying. And he did, and it still flies today. And Jim flies it. My dad actually may have flown in this airplane, aside from the fact I don't have his logbook. Had it as a child, and then my mother threw it away. He maybe flew that, and I've talked to Jim many times. We've tried to connect where I could go see the plane again, and it never works. He was coming up to Latrobe one year, and he was going to fly in early so we could get together. Nothing but thunderstorms. It's just been kind of bizarre that way. But one of these days, maybe I'll get to see that airplane. But that's the story. Now, that aircraft survived 200 missions in that war. I'm already probably behind schedule. The AD Skyraider came in maybe at the end of World War II, big time in Korea and all the way through Vietnam. I mean, that aircraft was, in Vietnam, that was your primary search and rescue plane that could fly around for 4 or 5 or 6 hours without being refueled. You also saw the F-9F Panther, which was the first jet to fly combat, and terribly underpowered. This one with the PP, whoop. Put this scissors up on there. Put that PP on the end. That was a photo plane. And we'll talk a little bit about photo planes in a bit. But to get this plane off the carrier, you needed a 32-knot wind over the bow. And for every knot you were down, you had to take a rocket off, because they could put 8 rockets on that. The Panthers really couldn't carry a lot of ordnance, but they sure barred up a lot of gas. Okay, so we'll talk about that. Then we had what they called them pinwheels. The helicopters came into play in Korea. And the HO-3S was the one that was mostly on the ships and horribly underpowered. They said, if you're much above sea level, don't expect me to hover this thing, okay? And we'll talk more about that. The HRS-1 was a Marine copter, could carry a lot more people, it had a lot more power, and there was some times when that was, they would use that versus the HO-3 if they needed one needed to get more than 1 or 2 people in there, and it needed the ability to hover at higher altitudes. Now, this is the Korean War. A quick history. I'm going to stand back here so I can actually read it. And now, Korea, after World War II, it got split in two. Russia had everything above the 38th parallel, I think it is, and we had everything below it. Interesting, the people whoever in the State Department that decided upon that division literally separated the the raw materials and some industry in North Korea from the part of Korea that created food. So, lack of food and famines and whatnot in North Korea, that's kind of famous. I had a friend that said all they have to do if they want to solve this, get a bunch of grills, light them up, they'll smell that smoke, and they're all going to come south. But that whole business of who wants to go south and who wants to stay north and whatnot will play a big role at the end of the war in actually getting an armistice. We'll talk about that a little bit. So what happened, shortly, I guess before this, the State Department had kind of murmured, and I think Atchison even gave a speech, Secretary of State, that said, you know what, we think Korea is beyond our sphere of defense. So we're not going to worry about Korea. And meanwhile, Kim in the north thought he should have the whole thing. Syngman Rhee in the south thought he should have the whole thing. They had skirmishes and fighting along that line all the time. So Kim goes to Joe Stahl and says, hey, Joe, this is my chance. They're not going to come. What do you think? You're going to support me? And he said, sure, go ahead. Go ahead. Hey, have a good time. I'll even give you some air support. So on the 25th of June, they come over the line. The war starts. Interesting thing that is not on this list, we only had one carrier in the Far East. It was the Valley Forge at that time. It was down at Hong Kong. By July the 3rd and 4th, the Valley Forge had gotten here, and I think it was Victoria, a smaller British carrier, came down from Japan, and they were launching airstrikes against North Korea, just days. That kind of shook up the North Koreans a little bit, and the one thing that was really important, Joe Stalin, who had been a little slow coming in with the air support, said, maybe not. So literally, aside from a bunch of old prop jobs that got eliminated, or whatever was left, I mean, the first thing they did was hit Pyongyang, the airport, wiped out a lot of aircraft on the runways, and a lot of what was left, the guys jumped in and flew them to Manchuria. So there was really no air support there. So as we go on down here, we're getting beat up pretty good. We did have some Army and Marine. We didn't have much here at neither the North or the South. They'd pretty much kicked out all the Russians, and they kicked us out on South Korea, but we did have some troops there. But as the North Koreans, they just kind of rolled through Seoul. They were on their way. Now, while this is going on, now we're planning around the middle of 15th here of September. Well, let me get this. 4th of August, they'd gotten down here and created this. If you see that little perimeter right there, that's all territory that we had control of in South Korea. But the North Koreans had no Navy. They had no air support. So we were kind of free to do what we wanted with Pusan as far as getting troops in and out and whatnot. Meanwhile, we're planning a landing. And the Chinese, Mao, he says, we know this guy, MacArthur. He's going to land somewhere. He's going to do it soon. So they went and looked at his history of his war record, and they had determined because Incheon was considered to be impossible, that's where he was going to go. And the Chinese went to the North Koreans and said, hey, Incheon's going to be it. And they said, nah, no way. No way that's going to happen. So Mao at that point said, okay, well, if a landing takes place and these troops go north of the 38th parallel after the landing, we're going to come in. So we had, there we go, I bumped that. The other thing that there was a lot of, at the time, the Chinese knew something was going on because of all the activity that was going on in Japan. The dock workers in Japan were primarily all not communists, they were politically communist leaning, and there was a lot of espionage and stuff going on. It's a little loud, okay. Is that better? Okay. So we know something's going to happen here. Well, what MacArthur did is down in this area, they made a big show. Made it look like they were going to land down here, not up here. The landing takes place. We can recapture Seoul, we go north. And we go north pretty quickly. And at this point, the thing that I personally didn't realize is that the Chinese did everything but put up neon signs to say, hey, we're coming. And up in this area, I didn't realize that these are actually, here is the first time they came over the border, but they had about 150,000 troops there. And up here they had about 130,000. How did we not know they were there? Well, there was a lot of evidence that this stuff was going on. The guys who were flying up, they could see along the bridges, the frozen rivers, obviously somebody was walking across the frozen rivers. They were making an effort to knock the bridges out, but the rivers were there. Also, the night fighters would see caravans of 150, 200 trucks coming to the border, lights go black, never see them again. Never see anything going the other way. The communist, the Chi-Coms, I guess, were in a lot of respects disrespected in what their capabilities might be. Despite the fact that there was a lot of evidence that things were going on, in Tokyo, Willoughby, who was MacArthur's chief intelligence officer, was saying, no, it's a fake. Not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. So it turned out that the intelligence officer, in my opinion, had a serious lack of intelligence. Because he would get upset. If somebody would come to him with evidence, I don't want to see that. No, I don't want to see that. Very arrogant. But what they didn't realize, these guys, they didn't travel on, they traveled on foot. They didn't need roads. And this terrible, terrible country up here, very, very difficult, mountainous country. And they didn't really, they didn't need a lot of support. But anyway, they come over, the 8th Army gets beaten back up around the Choson area. This happened a month later. This was like the end of October. It wasn't until the end of November that the whole Choson business started. And that was, the Chinese were actually losing a lot of people. But they had, and they made it clear, we have an unlimited number of foot soldiers. What we need is to be able to supply them. But we have an unlimited number. Miles saw this situation. You had what was 10 Corps, which was a lot of the, in the 1st Marine Division, had kind of come up and settle around this area around Choson. And in effect, MacArthur was planning an offensive to finish the war at that point. Chinese beat them to the gun. Here, Miles saw an opportunity to surround these people and desperately wanted to literally destroy the 1st Marine Division. He thought that if they could literally eliminate the division, that would be enough to maybe finish the war. Now, fortunately, they were able to get out of this situation. A lot of, again, no air support for the Koreans, but we had a lot of air support. We had, at this point, we probably had 3 carriers at any given time fast carriers, and then what we got these guys started coming up when we got the Valley Forge up pretty early. The Marines were here. They had nobody in the Far East, but by the beginning of August, they had 3 Marine squadrons up here, 2 Corsairs and 1 Corsair night fighter outfit. And a month after that, they had 2 more that came up. So the Marines are down here using the escort carriers and providing, they provided a lot of air support for the landing. And one of the things the Marines had done, that they had photo reconnaissance planes. At the end of the war, World War II, they were ordered to decommission them. They didn't have any money. So rather than throw the planes away and the pilots away, they said, oh, okay, well, the units are gone, but we're going to divvy them up. So everybody gets a couple of planes and 4 pilots. So when the Marines were able to be here on August 4th, immediately they had a photo reconnaissance ability that they didn't have before that, and then they were able to keep track of where the Chinese were here that way. Plus, they did through photo reconnaissance on the Incheon beaches. They were able to determine the tides and whatnot. So that was pretty important as well. So that kind of but now we have the Chinese coming down, and basically, I'm going to see if I can give you a little. So you can see where the Chinese came in. We go over at Incheon. We come up here. Sanko goes up into this area. Flip it around. The Chinese come down and out. And they literally pushed us. They took Seoul. They pushed all the way to here. At this point in time, they decided that they were going to wait for the spring offensive. Ridgway didn't wait. He turned it around and was able to get an offense that kind of drove. We got quite up near what eventually was the Armistice line, is this green line here. Give you a little picture of that. Right here, you can see where the Armistice line is. Here's Seoul. Pyongyang is up here. And so essentially, by the beginning of 51, January and February, the lines were kind of drawn. And by the time you got to May, this whole business of, we were starting to look for peace. Now, just because it took them 2 years to solve the problem, but between May of 51 and July of 53, when the armistice was signed, a lot of bloody battles over meaningless hills. Turned into a battle of who's going to blink first. Ooh, I took this hill. No, I want it back. No, I'm going to kick you off just because I want, just show you I can kick you off. And that went on for 2 years. A lot of lives were lost there. So what it does, this takes us now, VF-653 got called up for active duty February of 51. So right about the time all that was happening, that's when they were called up. Now they, as a unit, this is the patch. You know, they had the Red Dragon for strength and courage, the Blue Shield of Honor, Golden Triangle for the city of Pittsburgh, and Checkered Flag for racing success. So 653 was actually was put together in December of 49, but wasn't an active reserve unit. They were flying Corsairs out of Naval Air Station Akron, Ohio. They were called back in February of 51, and they were one of 14 reserve units that would fly about a third of all Navy and Marine combat missions in Korea. And I mentioned here one of the Bitter Birds were in the first 4 that ended up going to San Diego. At this point, they started their training here and in several other areas before they went out to the coast. There were like 1,200 12,571 coursers built between 42 and 53. 4,000 of those were built in Akron, Ohio. The commanding officer, Cook Cleland, he was actually a decorated World War II dive bomber pilot, Navy Cross, and not only that, he was an ace. Not too many guys in Dauntless shot down 5 Japs, but he did that. And we'll talk about it. He was very aggressive, and kind of balls to the walls kind of guy. Loved flying, loved combat. I mean, it was the whole thing. I mean, he survived the sinking of the Wasp. The Lexington, he was on the Lexington on the mission out of darkness when the planes were all running out of gas on their way back. And he had the oldest Dauntless in the group, and it didn't have a problem. He made it all the way. Now, he also did air racing between the wars, won the Thompson Trophy in 47 and 49, flying Super Corsairs. Super Corsairs was a plane that never really made it to production. Goodyear only built like 10 of them. There was like 28 cylinders, 3,000 horsepower. And Cleland went to his, sorry about that again, went to his friend Bull Halsey and said, hey, can you get 3 or 4 of these surplus out so I can pick them up for about $600 a piece? And that happened. So there was also some rumors that maybe that 653 got called up because Cleveland wanted to go to combat. You know, let's see. Now, so he was the CEO. You had Ray Ettinger from Crafton. He was the XO. He was a guy who was in the regular Navy. First, he wanted to be a pilot, but he was too old. When they said, oh, okay, you can be older, but you're married. We won't take you. We don't take married guys. Well, then when they relaxed that rule, he ended up finally flying, mostly as an instructor pilot. So he had 3,000 hours in a variety of airplanes. Then we also had 24, there were 24 pilots. Most of these guys were Western Pennsylvania, and some of them had flown combat, some of them didn't. What you found here were the guys that had flown combat weren't thrilled about the idea. The guys that hadn't flown combat were excited to try. And the other kind of unique thing, again, this group was put together in '49. Everybody knew everybody's family. It was, you knew the wives, the kids, and it was kind of like I mentioned to Gary, kind of like back in the Civil War when the whole town may have gone to war together, these guys were, I think only 1 or 2 of them weren't married. They were all married guys. The unit ended up going to Alameda for training. Basically, when they got there, there really wasn't a whole lot of ground troop support that they were going to be doing, but it was going to be interdiction. And they were going to be, daily trying to blow up rail lines, roads, bridges, locomotives, trucks, ox carts, and we'll talk about ox carts in a bit too, and just about anything that would move on it. The whole idea was to keep that endless supply of foot soldiers from getting enough supplies. Just some pictures. When 653 was formed, they were actually considered Pittsburgh's fighter squadron. Now, they were up in Akron, but then we just had the Allegheny Airport. We didn't have Greater Pitt at that point. But they were considered Pittsburgh's fighter squadron. It was a very social group. As I said, they don't only knew everybody, they all partied together as well, because Cleveland was a big party guy. He liked parties. And right there, that's my mom and dad. They even had a wedding. Nip Wilson and since they're a reserve unit, they didn't have the traditional swords, to make it. So a couple of guys brought their shotguns. And so we'll make it a military wedding. But it wasn't a shotgun wedding, okay? They get called up. They're going to go to war. Front page news, Pittsburgh Press. I didn't really realize that they had that much visibility in the area. So they started their training in Akron, and they were flying at this point the F4U 1As. These were FGs, rather. These were the ones built in Akron. And I think there was another. Training can be dangerous. At this point, they were down in Opelika, Florida, not too far from Miami, doing high-altitude gun training. Dave Robertson was flying. Robertson was flying this plane. The engine quit. He made a landing in somebody's backyard. Looks like a pretty big backyard, but crashed landed in the backyard, and one of the folks there grabbed a sledgehammer. The cockpit had jammed, grabbed the sledgehammer and broke it open so that they could get Robertson out of there before the plane caught on fire, which it never did. Okay, this is, they're at Alameda now, and they've got their brand new Corsairs, and that's the XO flying his number 102. That's Ray Ettinger. And, well, just because you had a plane with your number on it didn't mean you flew it. You literally flew whatever was lined up to fly. And Dave Robertson, now, I don't know whether, they're up in Fallon, Nevada, doing bomb training in the high desert, and one of the landing gear got off the runway and hit the soft sand. Now, I don't know, this came from a video that I had from Ray, and he didn't really say whether it was on takeoff or landing, but probably on landing, because there's no, the rocket rails are empty. So in November of 23, they're getting ready to go head for Korea from San Diego. And my dad was indicated here that in a letter to his brother, and a lot of this stuff is all based on letters he wrote to his brother, not to my mother, believe me. And they appeared in a lot of places. They ended up appearing in the Jesuit magazine, Jubilee, in June of '52. And then there's another article in Air and Space from January, I think, of 2000. I think it was 2010. Anyway, I have to look at that again. I always forget. That's a problem. When you get old, you can't remember stuff. But one of the things that, at this point, he's commenting that, hey, we haven't had anybody, nobody's died yet. That's highly unusual. We today see people, planes crash, training accidents. It was relatively common, and but what he's saying here, he says we're going to, it's amazing. Although my training in the Navy, fatal accidents were inevitable, we will lose some, perhaps a lot. Chances of getting shot down are far greater than in the last war. We will spend more time over enemy territory, and we will have to get low and find targets. Some small arms fire is shooting down an amazing number of planes. The water is so cold that you can only survive 5 to 8 minutes without an exposure suit. And then when they got on board the carrier, they were the only reserve unit on the Valley Forge at that time. The other 3 squadrons were regular, and they were kind of making fun of these guys because they hadn't had a lot of practice landing on an airstrip that is painted off to make it look like a carrier is a whole lot different than landing on a carrier. And so Cleveland had, Bob Bolzer was, he worked for the Post-Gazette, I think it was the Post-Gazette, and he was a graphic artist. So there was a candy wrapper that was, I guess, the template for what their helmets turned into. Cleveland said, we're going to paint the helmets red, we're going to put polka dots on there like a clown, and everybody's going to get a smiling clown painted on the side of that helmet, except you, Ray, you're the executive officer, you're in charge of discipline, we're going to make you a frowning clown. And the one thing that, again, Cleveland was a pusher. A really aggressive guy. He was determined that his clowns were going to be able to hold their own, which they did with the regular Navy guys. Then I mentioned how they lost. They lost the really nice planes when they got to Japan. But December 1st, they're on their way from Yokosuka down to Korea, and two pilots are up. Don London, who's my dad, had a mid-air collision. They were practicing the thatch weave. I don't know if you're familiar with that tactic. They collided and were killed. Don London was my dad's close friend and roommate, and Jim Porterfield was the other fella. London was just a new dad. Also was a law student at Pitt. Porterfield's wife was expecting. So, and this is something that throughout their tour, you get these guys and these families, these people you know pretty well, were dying. It was hard on the guys. Now, early in the war, they didn't have the ability to replenish the carriers at sea. A lot of those ships were hurriedly unmothballed a lot of tankers and whatnot to get them out to Korea. But once that got resolved, the carriers typically were on duty for 30 days. Didn't necessarily mean a month. It could be a mid-month thing, whatever, 30 days. Then they'd go back to Yokosuka, Japan for 10 days. And during that period, while they were, when they were at sea, they were rotating on like a 3-day schedule. There'd be strikes for 3 days, then they'd get a break to replenish at sea, and then go back to combat. And what was happening is we dropped more ordnance on North Korea than the entire Pacific War in World War II. And the Sky Raider, who we showed a little while ago, could carry 7,200 pounds of ordnance. The B-17, typically, maybe 6,000. So they could carry more ordnance than that. The Sky Raiders and the Corsairs could deplete the entire ordnance of a carrier in 3 days if they were flying regularly. The F-9F Panthers took care of getting rid of all the avgas. They burned a lot of gas, didn't carry a lot of bombs, but they did. They used 20-millimeter cannons. The other thing was the Panthers, the jet engines needed to be lubricant. They needed lubricant. Remember the old two-cycle engine? You had to put lubricant in the avgas to keep the engine running. And they would, so they had to be real careful with what they did with that. But they had a machine that did that, and it was too slow. So in the after-action reports, they said they found a solution, didn't explain it. I think they were just saying, oh, yeah, we'll dump somebody in here, pump some of that in there, off we go. If it doesn't work, okay, we'll see what happens. But that was, there was a lot of things at that time that, these carriers were not designed for jets. Now, the last note here was my dad saying that, okay, they completed 14 missions. They came here with 28 pilots. Well, how'd they get 28 pilots when they had 24, when they started with 24? Well, one of the things, this was not a carrier air group. This was a carrier air task group. They didn't have enough air groups. To get an air group, you had to go to Congress. So you'd read, well, there was a loophole. Well, they never explained the loophole. What the loophole was is they took all of their squadrons, added 4 pilots and 2 planes, and then cherry-picked them to create an air group. And so then they picked up 4 more pilots, so then they had 28 pilots, and out of that group, they lost 4 in the first month. Now, winter in Korea. Oop, a little quick there. I love that picture, but that's not, that's what it was. And if you see these, you got the Panther there, but the gas tanks are on the wing and they're way up at the top. They literally put a big ladder up there and drug a hose up and filled them from the top on deck. Talked about the exposure suit. This is what a guy would have to be wearing in the winter. You start off with your G suit. Then you put on flannel-lined pants and a wool shirt. another insulation type suit that would go under the exposure suit, a rubber suit, better known as the poopy bag. Basically, whatever came out of you stayed in the bag. And then they'd put on actually a light flight suit to kind of protect. You didn't want to cut the exposure suit, and then the survival vest and whatnot. The problem is if you didn't end up in the water and you were on land, trying to maneuver around in the poopy suit was a problem, and you're sweating like crazy. But the other problem with this suit is the seal around the neck and around the cuffs failed frequently. Then you would start filling up with water inside you. So it got to the point where if you were going to have to crash land, and they didn't think they could get a copter to you within about 20 minutes, they told you to just crash behind enemy lines. Your chances are better of getting picked up that way. They'd find guys dead. Or if you got out of your plane and you managed to get the life raft out and got that inflated, you're in pretty good shape. More often than not, you didn't have time. But the planes went down quickly. Replenishment. I think those are 1,000-pound bombs. They're just moving them back and forth from ship to, they'd also get their mail and a bunch of other stuff. But that was, took them about a day to get everything moved over and ready to go. Now this is another letter to my uncle, and he says, I never felt nervous on any of my flights. If you have faith in that engine, you feel safe and secure until the black puffs start rocking you around. If you get hit badly, it's usually a sudden death. If you don't get hit, just another day over enemy territory. And another comment in there, and you don't worry about the ground fire because you can't see it. Don't worry about it. You get hit, oh well. So the Valley Forge completed their first tour at the middle of January, and despite the challenging weather, 129 airmen and 79 aircraft, including, oh God, they flew 1,000 missions. They lost 10 guys. Then in February, ATG-1, they had some bad weather. They only shut down for a couple of days. But on February 8th, they had a really gruesome day. There were many rescue combat patrols, RESCAPs, flights that support extraction of two of their Skyraider pilots behind enemy lines. Both failed. Both two helicopters crashed. One at each site. A Corsair pilot from the night flying detachment was killed, while 5 other RESCAP aircraft suffered crippling damage. Ray Ettinger, the XO-653, he came back with no hydraulics, low on fuel, and a hung rocket. The landing gear collapsed. The hung rocket broke loose and rolled down the deck. Fortunately, didn't create any other problems, and tumbled and did not into the water. Sanko flew one of the RESCAP missions. He strafed and bombed a hill and kept the North Koreans from reaching the site. Flying low, he destroyed and hidden an aircraft gun. And he wrote this: just quivered as near misses went by. I did not care. As we wanted to do, we wanted so hard to give those guys on the ground a break. Now, James Michener was embedded in Task Force 77. He was on the Philippine Sea, I think three months, and then he was on the Valley Forge for 3 months. And based on that description, he wrote a newspaper clip titled "An Epic in Failure." He was impressed at the pilot's perseverance in an article that he wrote in July '52 in the Reader's Digest. he recounted what the pilots told him: "We don't desert our men." The experience inspired the fictional drama of the downed aircraft and helicopter pilot that concluded the Michener's novel Bridges of Toko-Ri, and the movie thereof. The second crash site was actually, they were attacking some bridges in the Samdong-Ni Valley. These bridges were steel and concrete, and 3 of them, and they managed to knock them down. But those bridges were near 2 little villages, Poko-Ri and Tokotan. Those were the bridges that he wrote about. Bridges at Toko-Ri. And those bridges, in the beginning of February, they knocked them down. By the end of February, they were back up again. That's the other thing. Everything they knocked down, the Chinese could typically put back in a day or 2. They had 50,000 laborers available to repair these things. So it was kind of, it was. Okay, in March, let's see, what do we got? March, the weather got better, and they were trying to take out rail lines before the monsoon came in. And March 7th, the letter revealed that they were taking out rails, ox carts, and a small bullet hole in his cowling. Seems like the guns are increasing in numbers and accuracy every day. Come back with battle scars. It seems like we can't get by a month without losses. The aircraft records show that about the point in time where the battle damage was about 50% higher, and you can see that in the after action reports through April. May and June, and they quit reporting it on those reports. They moved those reports to an attachment that apparently weren't declassified. Now, and we all, Sanko wondered, and at this point he was wondering, they had a lot of pilot casualties, and he was wondering if maybe we were being too aggressive, and he was trying to get to Cleveland, and he thought Cleveland. He said you must have been born with a horseshoe in your pocket, because nothing hit him. I mean, or if he got in a jam, he always got out of it. I mean, they used to string cables across narrow valleys, and you couldn't see it. You're on a run. You hit the cable. He hit a cable and ripped up his wing, but he got back. Another fellow hit a cable, and it knocked the pin out on the bomb on his wing. And detonator started to spin, and next thing you know, he blew himself to smithereens. And then on April 13th, they find out that, oh, guess what? You're going to start your 4th tour, but that's not it. No, we want you to come back from that, and then we're going to send you back to Japan for 7 days, and then we want you out here for 3 more weeks. And, at this point, I guess he was writing to my mother, and he says, hey, the folks are telling us, take it easy, play it safe. And his reaction to that is, it's just kind of hard to do. A job is a job, and always do my best. I have 180 hours, about 30 to go. I'm going to, see, it's getting kind of late, so I'm going to skip through this part right here. Just want to give you some idea. You can see on this that this is a flak study, and they're concerned about light aircraft, like anti-aircraft guns, and empty positions. You jump forward to June of '52, and now we're looking at heavy guns, automatic guns. And what had happened is thousands of these guns came down from the Russians. They had 57 millimeters that could fire 300 rounds a minute, 37 millimeters, which were the same guns that were used in Vietnam, at that point were what they were called rapid firing. They could fire 1,200 rounds a minute. And then there was the 23 millimeters that, that doesn't sound too bad, but the 23 millimeters were radar controlled. They could lock on at 5 miles, and if they did, you were dead. You got hit. They're very, very accurate. That's, just a, here we, you see this bridge here. This is, you can see right here where this bridge was taken, damaged. And then right here, they've built a bypass bridge right next to a regular traffic bridge. So what did they have guarding that? Well, let's get a little closer. Maybe even a little closer. Look at all these guns. Here's the target area. But they've guns everywhere. What they started to do, actually, you'll see empty gun position. They started to move the guns further up the mountain so they could see better. You can see the planes coming in earlier. This is another. This, they would on these studies that they would. It was pretty much like put a collage together, and you could see there was an area of 5 guns that they wanted to hit because they were heavy guns, and you could see how that they were laid out. This was the target area 2 days before, and then they came back 2 days later to get the guns. Those are the original. There was a troop barracks area, a bridge cut, and a marshalling yard. Those are the guns that were around that area. I'm going to move quickly. You can see this bridge. You really see it here. Bridge is gone. The bypass was damaged. Again, Ray, when they got done with the runs, there was always a photo plane right behind them, so they could see what they'd done. Ray said, they'll fix that in a day.
Hey, Dan.
Yeah.
We're coming up on 11 o'clock. Can you, real quick, give an overview of your father's situation?
Sure.
And his what happened and so forth, and then we can open it up for a few questions if you guys have some.
Okay, what I can tell you is that on May 11th, my dad got a letter that my daughter or my sister was born. Right away, he wrote back to my mother, but that letter arrived after the telegram that indicated that he was shot down by anti-aircraft fire on May 13th, 1952. I happened to be in the house when that happened. The house had a living room, dining room, and a kitchen. I used to play in the dining room area. My mother and I don't remember what aunt it was, literally collapsed. And I went into the kitchen, and I'm 3.5 years old, whatever. And my grandmother's just doing dishes. And I was told later that she knew exactly when he died. She knew it. You hear those stories, but she knew it. And so really at the end of that, let's see.
Where in Korea was he shot down?
If you would just want to go down, and you can just look at this. VF-653 suffered a lot of casualties. They had 13 pilots that were either missing, killed, or severely injured. That was 46% of the first deployment. First deployed, and if you look at the entire ATG-1, literally their loss rate per mission was twice anybody else. And that's the flying low, maybe aggressive, whatever, you got to do your job, but they were flying low and you had to fly low to get it done. The Valley Forge, it started off that cruise with 76 aircraft, lost 54 in combat, or an 85% loss rate. That's where my dad was killed, right there. And this is what I have on my phone. If you put those coordinates into Google or whatever map, I can see exactly where. Here's Wosan, Mucheon. That's a picture that was taken. There was a Navy photographer on board when they were on their way back. Bob Balzer had him, hey, take my camera and take our picture. Well, those helmets, there's 13 helmets there. Those are the guys that didn't come back. This is a plaque that's on the Yorktown and Patriots Point in Charleston, South Carolina. Up here, all the carrier Corsair pilots who were killed in World War II. Carrier. Here's all the carrier Corsair pilots that were killed. These are combat. Now, if you died in an accident, your plane didn't take off or you crashed, they didn't count that that wasn't combat. There's exactly 95 guys on this list and 95 guys on that list. And if you look here, doesn't look like a big list. There were guys that lost a lot. Now, the League only lost a couple because they were there early and there wasn't any aircraft to deal with. And at the Valley Forge, they had like 11 and 6 of them were 653. That's the total of 4 cruises, 16 pours. So bottom line, they were there at the wrong time. Wrong place, wrong time. After they went back, new rules. Nobody flies below 3,000 feet. 1 pass, and you're out of there. We have Ted Williams and John Glenn here, and they were flying jets. I'm not going to, I think I'll pass on that. Just let you know that there was a celebration when the 653 came back. It came back from what they called Flak Alley. You don't know about Mig Alley, but this was Flak Alley. You know, they had, it was tremendous anti-aircraft fire. Celebration, met the mayor, had a parade from the airport in. It was, I was surprised at that. This is the Valley Forge actually in about 2 years' time. 36 tanks, 51 enemy aircraft, 143 warehouses, 502 enemy boats, 1,572 enemy trucks, vehicles, and probably ox carts, 205 railroad cars, 201 locomotives, 9,900 enemy troops. What I can say with the ox carts, after they do their missions, they break off it in 2-plane elements and look for whatever they can shoot at. So they spend a lot of time over enemy territory. If you saw an ox cart, they do a pass and wouldn't fire. If the guy with the ox cart took the time to unhook the ox and take him away from the cart, that was probably some poor farmer that was his most prized possession. If the guy cut and run and left the ox in the cart in the middle of the road, 99 times out of 100, it'll blow up when you hit it.
All right, do we have any questions?
Questions?
Anybody got any questions?
Yeah.
One plane on the carrier deck that had the wing tanks, you referred to it as a Panther. I remember something similar called a Shooting Star.
Well, the Shooting Star was the Air Force plane.
Okay.
Okay. They also had the Banshee. The Banshee was if you look at that, there was a Panther, and there was one off to the right that looked a little kind of the same, but not quite. That would have been a Banshee. And they were using those for air. They started to use those for air photo reconnaissance because 1, they were faster. 2, they vibrated less, so you got better pictures than the prop planes.
Hey, Dan?
Yeah.
I have 2 questions. Number 1, when they put those planes together again, you said, putting the planes together, does somebody inspect them from the government before they fly them in the air?
Well, actually, both Topals were certified to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
My other question
I don't know what the rules were back then on, essentially it was like a sport plane.
after the introduction of the MiGs and the MiG jets and the Sabre jets, this squadron was basically support for the ground troops?
Oh, yeah, the Corsairs were basically interdiction, bombers and troop support. The MiGs, the MiGs stayed north. They were pretty much up on up the other end of the...
Now, at the beginning of the war, they used B-29s, the World War II B-29s.
Yes.
The bombing. Now, when they introduced the MiGs, the B-29s had a lot of losses because they didn't have any type of fighter escorts, right?
Well, and they didn't really, yeah, at that point, the F-86s weren't there yet. And so they started flying the B-29s at night, and that's when they learned that the TRICOMs had radar-controlled searchlights. they could pick them out. And then you did have an officer on board who was trying to break that radar connection. Okay?
To answer the question of when they rebuild old military aircraft like that, they're usually certified in one of two categories, either restricted or experimental. The FAA does come out and inspect them, but it's kind of like, if you want to strap your ass to it, go ahead, buddy. But there are certain conventional procedures of repair and so forth, but they're not certified in a standard category. They're restricted or an experimental category. Anybody else got any?
What about Swickley Airport? Is that what became Swickley Heights Golf Club?
Well, there was an airport up at Swickley.
Where?
Oh, no, I did. You know, it's not too far from town, actually. I was only there like, I don't know if, I've driven past it once or twice. I'm not real familiar with that, because I would, most of they do air shows over at Beaver County, and I'd go over there. But, yeah, I think it's, I don't know if it's still there or not. The airport's still there. But if it was, it really wasn't, it was more like a, you know, sport plane kind of private, yeah. I don't even think it was, I don't know.
Yeah. I wonder if some old maps of Swickley would have it on there.
I don't know.
I live up there.
Yeah, it was built in the hangar. I mean, they had a hangar up there that they used for 10 years.
Swickley Valley Historical Society would have those shows. Yeah. Anybody else got a question?
Not so much a question. When I married my first wife, she was South Korean. I went to Seoul for my honeymoon. And Seoul was a modern city like New York City, you know, big skyscrapers and everything. But when we went through the mountain to where she lived in Mapo-ku on the other side of the mountain, it was like going back into the 1890s. You know, they still had to pull the cart, you know, like taxi cabs, everything. But they had buildings where the battleships, like the Missouri with those big 16, 20-inch shells, they still had buildings with those big 20 or 30-foot holes that got the shells from the battleships still embedded in the buildings. Because we used to go up on the top floor and play ping pong.
They said those.
Right out the window, which is a 20-foot salvo hole.
They said those shells from those type of ships was like launching a Volkswagen 20 miles. Give you an idea how heavy they were and how far they could go.
Oh yeah, they moved.
Anybody else got a Marty?
How old were you when your dad died?
About 3.5.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. I was 3.5. My sister was 6 weeks old. She never saw him.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a great weekend. Eden Park today for lunch. Dan, thank you very much.